Hello everyone, I'm with one of Glenavon's best players of the last 50 years, arguably the best big match player in the club's history, none other than Geoff Ferris. I've just arrived from Lurgan and I'm sitting at Geoff's kitchen table. We've got cups of tea and coffee and we're going to spend the next little while talking about his career with the club, and then we're going to move to Geoff's church and we're going to talk there about his faith journey, and we're going to finish off with a visit to Limavady Showgrounds where he's going to talk to us about his current role there as both chaplain and chairman. So it's all about football, faith and the festive season. So Geoff Ferris, as I've said, one of the best players Glenavon has had since the Second World War. He had a remarkable career with us. He joined the club in the summer of 1988 and left us to join Coleraine in the summer of 1994. Now, in those 6 seasons with us, he made 219 first-team appearances. That was 188 starts and 31 appearances as sub, and he scored 69 goals. In his first season, 1988-89, he played 56 games out of 56 and scored 27 goals. So now we're going to hear from Geoff himself. Geoff, tell us a bit about how you moved from RUC to Glenavon. You had scored 26 goals in the RUC team in the 1987-88 season. Then you made the move to Mourneview Park. How did that all come about?
Well, George, thanks for that introduction. Well, I suppose playing for the RUC, I thought really that was my last chance of getting into the Irish League, because most players playing for the RUC really stayed and played as part of their job and part of their football. But I think the year before I went to Glenavon, Gary McCartney made the move to Glentoran, and I suppose that inspired me to maybe see if I could get into the Irish League, and it just came about by pure accident when a good friend of mine, Denver Cardwell, who was in the police, approached me and asked would I be interested in going to Glenavon. So he set up a meeting with the then manager, Terry Nicholson, and we met up and the deal was done, and that's how I became a signed player for Glenavon back in 1988.
So do you remember anything about your first meeting with Terry Nicholson?
I do remember the meeting. He seemed to be quite keen to sign me. I recall him saying that he was looking for a forward who could hold the ball up and allow his team as midfielders to come on a bit, and I suppose I must have fitted the criteria that he was looking for. And of course, with me being so keen to play in the Irish League, at that time I was living and working in Belfast, and I suppose Lurgan wasn't that far away to make the journey down to training and on match days. So that's how it happened. I remember it clearly, the conversation and the place where it was, and we signed without any issues or without any complications, and there was no big contracts or money talks or anything like that. I just signed the dotted line and that was it.
What did you know about Glenavon before you learned about the club's interest?
I suppose very little. I suppose if I was going to play in the Irish League then, I probably was thinking more locally with maybe Coleraine or Ballymena or someone like that. So I didn't really know much about Glenavon, even where they played or their supporters or their background or their achievements. I do remember, I think Terry mentioned something about them being in Europe. They had just qualified, I believe, for Europe. And he used that as an incentive to sign me, that we would be playing in one of the European Cups. So I really didn't know a lot until I actually arrived and trained and met the squad, met the management team, met the board, and then, of course, met the lovely bunch of supporters that followed Glenavon.
What were your first impressions?
Well, I was very impressed with Glenavon, the setup, the pitch, their ambitions, I think they were just turning the corner in relation to forming a good squad of players, and they were looking to win something and achieve something, and they were signing the right type of player. And I was really impressed by the supporters and how well the club was actually supported by a number of different supporters clubs, and the large amount of fans that actually followed them in those days.
Do you remember your first goal for Glenavon?
No. I remember very few of my goals. I do remember some of them, but I have no idea what my first goal was. But I'm sure, George, you're going to tell me.
Yes, Geoff, I am. Your first goal in a Glenavon shirt was in a friendly game at Dungannon. Glenavon won the game 5-1. You scored one goal, but the significance of the game was that there was a celebrity appearance that day by a certain George Best. Do you remember that at all?
I don't remember that. Are you sure that's correct, George, now?
Yes, George Best was definitely there. He didn't play in the game. I think Dungannon may have been opening their new clubhouse or something like that, but he was at the game. I've seen a photograph of him pictured with the Glenavon squad that day. But your first competitive goal for the club was in your third game against Cliftonville at Mornview in an Ulster Cup game. I think you scored in a 3-2 win. Do you remember some of the players you played with in that first season?
Yeah, I do remember the players, and I think actually my first number of games, looking back on it now, I think Terry actually played me a wee bit deeper and maybe played me in a midfield role. And now when you mention that Cliftonville match, something tells me that I scored that goal playing from midfield. It might have been a shot outside the box. It is one of the ones that maybe I do remember. But I do remember the players clearly, you know, the likes of Duncan Lowry, Robbie Beck in goals, Paul Byrne, wee Vinton McConville. Was Ray McCoy there when I signed? I think he was.
No, Raymond didn't come for another 2 seasons.
All right, okay. Who was playing up front then? I know Terry had actually signed a young guy from Omatown that season, Marty Woodhead, was it? Yeah, and I know he was more of a striker, and my memories of Terry signing me and Marty was the one that he thought would come through and do the needful for him, and I don't think Marty just settled as well as everybody wanted him. He was such a good player, and I think after a number of months, Marty maybe pulled the plug, I think even before Christmas. Now, I don't know if that maybe created the space for me to play as a more of a striker then. But I remember then moving into the striking role, and I seemed to enjoy it, and it seemed to suit me, and Glenavon's style of play seemed to suit me, and I started, I suppose, scoring the odd goal here and there.
That first season, Glenavon, it's fair to say, were inconsistent, but had bright moments. But of course, the memorable part of that season was what happened at the end and the run to the Budweiser Cup final. Do you remember any of the early games in the competition?
No, not really now. Obviously, I do just remember the final against Linfield. I think that was the first match a draw and went to a replay. So I'm not really sure who we did play or beat to get to the final that year.
We played Distillery in the first round, which was a 2-leg first round. We won 3-0 at Mornview in the first leg, but lost 2-0 at New Grosvenor in the second leg, so we went through the first round. Then we played Portadown in the quarter final. We defeated them 2-0. Played Coleraine in the semi-final and defeated Coleraine 3-0, and then went through to the final against Linfield. Now, Linfield were league champions at the time, and we played them in the first game at the Oval on a very bad night. Do you remember much about that match?
Yeah, I do remember it. It was a poor night. I don't think it was a great match. I think maybe we might even been fortunate enough to get the draw to take it to a replay. And yes, I do recall Linfield were a very strong side in those days, and I suppose to to take the match to a replay was very positive for us, and I suppose the way the match went in the replay, we didn't really expect such a convincing victory.
Yes, the first game finished 1-1. We scored an equaliser in the last minute of extra time to take it to a replay. In fact, I think it may have been an own goal. There was a corner kick awarded and there was a bit of controversy. Linfield felt that it wasn't actually a corner, but we scored, and that took us to a second game. So the replay against Linfield, of course, goes down in Glenavon folklore, one of the club's most outstanding performances. Can you remember that day? Were you working, for example?
I have no idea what I was doing in the lead up to that match, George. It was so long ago now. I'm sure I probably was working in the lead up to it. But I do have obviously very happy memories of that match for a number of reasons. Probably the most important, that we actually won the trophy. We won it convincingly against a very strong Linfield team, who probably were the favourites to win that match by a long way. But it was one of those matches that we played as a team, we played as a unit, and just everything just seemed to work out for us in front of goal and defensively. And yes, it was certainly a memorable match, and certainly to score a hat-trick in a final, it's probably something I won't forget. And to this day, I suppose a lot of supporters would still remind me of that, including David Jeffrey, who I think was marking me, and George Dunlop, who was in goals. I would see those guys now and again, and it could come up in the conversation for a bit of fun now.
Can you remember the 3 goals? You scored the first one, Geoff, in the 18th minute of the first half.
Yeah, I remember the goals quite well, particularly I remember the last 2. I'm not too sure of the first one.
The first one, Geoff, was a McBride, Stevie Conville, Desi McCann move, which you finished off inside the penalty area. Then we were 1-0 up at half time. Then Gary Blackledge got us 2-0 ahead early in the second half, and then you scored the third. Do you remember the third?
Yeah, that was the one that I think I turned by David Jeffrey and hit it from outside the box, just into the top corner. Yes, it was a good goal, and it is one of the goals that probably I have seen now and again on YouTube. And when I look at it, I sort of wonder how I even scored such a good goal now, looking back on it. But it was a really good goal. And then, of course, I do remember the third goal. I think it might have been even Paul Byrne that passed the third goal to me, and then I just sort of drilled it into the far corner. I think that was our 6th. That was the 6th or last goal.
Yes, the 5th goal was scored by Duncan Lowry with a fabulous header, and then you scored the 6th goal. Can you remember anything about the celebrations, about just the whole atmosphere after the game?
Yeah, I remember we were obviously on a high, and I remember it was probably the first time I got interviewed on camera by a reporter, and when he stuck the mic to my mouth, I didn't know what to say. I suppose it was that carried up in events, and I do recall saying the word brilliant to almost every question. And I suppose to this day I still get a wee bit of stick about that interview, and I wouldn't even watch it. It was so bad now, saying this word brilliant to every question. But yeah, it was good. But I think, George, just after the match, we probably had a wee celebration in the club, and then everybody just petered off home and back to work the next day.
That was Glenavon's first trophy win for 23 years, so it really was a monumental occasion. And it was, in a sense, the coming together of the team that Terry had been constructing over the previous couple of seasons. Now, Gary Blackledge scored the second goal. What are your memories of Gary?
Well, I have fond memories of Gary. He was such a great player, having played so many matches and scored so many goals, and scoring goals just came naturally to him. Now, I know he probably spent more time on the physio's bench than he did on the pitch, I always remember that about Gary, and I think he had poor Kenny Bell's head turned, saying he was injured and sore legs when he was just really trying to avoid training. But he was a good player, and in fact I probably learned quite a bit from him in the few years I played alongside Gary. He was a great player and a good one of the characters of the game, and I had the honour of playing alongside of him in a Glenavon shirt.
And Duncan Lowry was also on the score sheet in the final. He had been with the club since 1983. He had been with us through difficult years in the early and mid-80s. And of course, he was the club captain. What are your memories of Duncan?
Yeah, well, Duncan clearly stands out ahead. He was a centre half, a commanding centre half, a great centre half, and a great leader, a great team captain, and such a nice guy. And I have kept in contact with Duncan over the years now, even since he emigrated to New Zealand. We've chatted a bit on the phone and on different WhatsApp links. And Duncan's a committed Christian like myself, which is good to know. But yeah, what a player Duncan was, and probably one of the main reasons as well at that time why Glenavon turned the corner with such a leader at the back, along with people like Robbie Beck and Paul Byrne, great players along the back line for Glenavon.
I also have great memories of Duncan. His wife, Maureen, attended my church in Lurgan, and Duncan used to arrive at the end of the service to collect Maureen. But Duncan was a great Glenavon player of that era. Now, the other goal scorer that night was Stephen McBride, another absolutely outstanding player of that era. What are your memories of Stephen?
Well, again, players like Stephen McBride stand out. He was an outstanding player. When he got the ball, he could do things with the ball. He could score goals. He could cross. He could take on players. He just was such a really good professional footballer who, when he arrived in the changing room, he was totally committed. He was totally focused on the game. And he might have had 2 or 3 pairs of football boots with him in the changing rooms. He wasn't too sure what pair he was going to wear for the match. But certainly when he went on the field, he did really well and was a game changer for Glenavon.
So, Geoff, do you have any other memories of the Budweiser final?
Well, one other memory that sticks in my head, I'm just not sure how true it is, but one of the Linfield board members had been on holiday. He was keen to hear the result of the match, and when he phoned back home to find out what the score was, he was told, the score was 6-1. And he replied, well, that's a great result. I knew we had won the match, but I didn't think we had won by that margin. And the guy who was speaking to him says, no, well, he says, we actually lost 6-1. So that sort of sticks out in my head as one of the stories I heard shortly after the match.
Geoff, I must ask you a question about a game a few months before the Budweiser final. It was a league match at Solitude against Cliftonville. Glenavon won the game 1-0, and you scored, I reckon, your best goal for Glenavon that day. It was a ball that came out to the edge of the penalty area. It was at the dressing room's end of Solitude. The ball came out, it bounced on the edge of the area, and you caught it on the half volley and hit it like a missile into the roof of the net. You don't remember that goal?
Seriously, I don't remember that goal, George, but you're making it sound as a really good goal and one that maybe I should remember. But I can't remember that goal.
Well, funny, I remember it for a personal reason, because within seconds of you scoring that goal, I was actually lying on the terrace. A Cliftonville fan assaulted me, literally, as you hit the ball into the net. It's a long story, but there had been a few problems when Cliftonville were at Mourneview two months earlier. And then we went back to Solitude in January, and I was probably wearing a scarf. And I remember some Cliftonville fans congregating around us. And then you scored, and the next thing I remember, I was picking myself up off the terrace, and another Glenavon supporter, Ian Gray, who now lives in Australia, Ian was attacked. Actually, he suffered more than I did, but it means that goal just sticks out vividly in my memory. But it's one of many great goals you scored. So that was a tremendous first season. You were the club's player of the season. Do you remember receiving the award as player of the season? Were you surprised you did so well in your debut season?
I do remember that awards night, and I suppose I was surprised at how well maybe I settled into a team, playing at a higher level than what I was used to. And I suppose it's just one of the things in the life of a footballer. Sometimes it works out well for you, sometimes it just doesn't click. But I think for me, looking back on it now, that season, the fact that I stayed fit, I was able to play every match, and the fact that I was able to score a few goals, it just made it out to be such a great season for me. And I think that was the year that there was an Irish League select team was picked by Roy Coyle to go on a tour of America. And I think me and Paul Byrne possibly got picked for that, along with the likes of Gary McCartney and Big Kirk Hunter and George Dunlop, Billy Caskey, all the great names that were playing with all the other clubs at that time. And it was such an honour for me, not only to play for a club like Glenavon, but to be actually picked for an Irish League select team and play and meet up and socialise with some of the great characters of the game back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Now, that Budweiser Cup win gave Glenavon the confidence to believe that it could compete with the top clubs at the time. And the following season, the 89-90 season, the club made a roaring start, winning 12 of its first 13 games. There were victories against Ards, 1-0 victory against Linfield, 2-1 victory against Ballymena, 2-1 victory against Coleraine, 4-0 win against Crusaders, etc. And then a very memorable game, the Ulster Cup semi-final in September 1989 at Windsor Park. We played Cliftonville and won that semi-final 5-3 with Stephen McBride scoring a hat-trick. Do you remember that game?
Yeah, I think I do recall it in the background now. And yes, when you go through those results, I do remember us as a team playing well together, gelling well together, and winning matches. And certainly we were going in the right direction. And I do recall Portadown being very strong in those days as well. And it was nearly as if the big two teams for a few seasons was Glenavon and Portadown rather than the Linfield and Glentoran, who were still good sides and still hard to beat. But I've many memories of those matches and the large turnout of fans coming to support us. I mean, when Portadown came to Glenavon or Glenavon went to Portadown, it was such a big following and such an atmosphere to play in.
You mentioned the big attendances at that time. I was looking back last night. We played Portadown in that 89-90 season towards the end on Easter Saturday. And the note in the Glenavon programme after the game was that the RUC estimated the attendance at over 5,500. And in those days, Glenavon were going to away games with 500, 1,000 supporters. Wasn't unusual. It must have been exciting as a player to be playing in front of such big crowds.
Yeah, it certainly was. For me, coming playing football with the likes of Limavady and the RUC, where you had a handful of people following the team, to now to be playing in the Irish League and playing for such a big club as Glenavon and having such large support there, wanting you to do well and supporting you and encouraging you. And I was the type of player that I gave everything on the pitch, and I wanted, not only did I want to do well for the team and my manager, I wanted to do well for the fans standing in the terrace and in those wet, cold nights paying their money to come in to watch people like me So I wanted to do as best I can, and I tried to give everything on the pitch, for my team.
Well, Geoff, you certainly did that. You were a very committed player. If I was to ask you what your strengths as a player were, what would you say?
Well, I didn't have electric pace anyway. I wasn't a pacey player. I suppose looking for the ball up front and playing the ball into my feet. I always heard the manager play the ball into Geoff's feet and he'll hold it up. So I suppose that was my strength, being able to hold the ball up and shield it off the defenders and playing other people in, or maybe just trying to turn a defender. I suppose I'm now playing for the veterans football, even playing now for the veterans alongside of Desi Edgar, Marty Tabb and all. I'm playing up front and they keep saying, just knock it into Geoff's feet. So that must have been my strength, Geordie, knocking the ball into my feet, and I suppose I had some ability to maybe hold on to it for a period of time.
My memory is, Geoff, you seemed to be incredibly strong, just physically strong, and as you've said, very difficult to knock off the ball. My other memory is that you were often fouled in the penalty area, leading to penalty kicks. In fact, you seem to have a shuffle. We used to call it the Ferris shuffle, where you sort of showed the defender some of the ball and he stretched to get it. And in the course of doing that, you ended up falling and we got a penalty. In fact, there was one season in your 6 seasons with us when Glenavon was awarded no fewer than 17 penalty kicks. Nowadays, if we get 4 penalty kicks in a season, it's unusual, but 17 in one season. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, I do recall getting a number of penalty kicks, and I must say I'm not a diver. I suppose with my so-called skill of holding on to the ball, I always liked to get the ball in the box where it was more dangerous for players to tackle me and give away maybe a penalty, but I had some sort of knack of sort of turning with the ball and getting my timing right and waiting for the defender who missed the ball and clipped me. And certainly it was good to win penalties for the club. I do actually recall during my last few seasons playing for the Korean and Carrick Rangers for a short period. I remember Carrick playing, I think it was Bangor actually, and we won the game 3. It might have been 3-0, and our 3 goals were 3 penalties, and I won the 3 of them. And I did get a bit of stick about that, but I can recall every one was a clear-cut penalty where I was chopped in the box. So I don't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing winning so many penalties, but when you're getting them and scoring them for the team, I suppose it's a plus.
So in that second season, Geoff, Glenavon had another trophy win, the Road Ferry League Cup. Glenavon played Newry Town in the final. It was played in December, just before Christmas. We had beaten Tobermore, Limavady United and Ards on the way to the final against Newry. And we beat Newry 3-1 at Windsor Park. And again, you scored 2 goals. Do you have any memories of that final?
Yeah, I do recall that final, because I remember actually Peter Watson giving me a freer role for that particular final, and I remember him telling me he wanted me to play a certain role in behind, like a striker. I do recall scoring a couple of goals in that final. I think we were actually 3 up at half time, and things were going very well for us. We had a superb first half at Windsor, and to score 3 goals, I suppose, in a final and get in at half time 3 up was a great boost for us. But I do think we come out the second half and we just didn't perform as well as maybe we should have. We could have went on and maybe scored another goal or 2, or we would have wanted to score another goal or 2. But fair play to Newry, they come back at us. They didn't sit back, and they scored and made it more a competitive second half.
The other Glenavon goal scorer in that final against Newry was Stevie Conville. Do you have many memories of Stephen?
Yeah, I remember Stevie well. He was a committed right winger type player who didn't like wearing shin guards. His socks were always down around his ankles. I don't think he liked the law coming in that you must wear shin guards. I'm not sure when that came in, but Stevie was just one of those players who you didn't have to worry about in relation to playing. He was committed. He constantly performed at a good level, and he worked tirelessly up and down the pitch, and he certainly was a very good addition to your squad at that time.
That was another successful season, Geoff, for Glenavon. In fact, in the second half, we made a sustained challenge for the league championship. If you recall, Glenavon won 9 and drew 1 of the last 10 league matches. Do you remember at that time we signed a rather famous striker to replace Gary Blackledge, who suffered an injury at work and was basically unavailable for the last 3 months of the season?
Yeah, Jerry Armstrong. Yes, of course. In fact, I met Jerry Armstrong at a dinner about 2 weeks ago, and I was chatting to him about his days in Glenavon, and I says to him, Jerry, you know, my claim to fame is that I played alongside you. Such a star player for Northern Ireland, and of course scoring that great goal back against Spain in 1982. So it was good to see him, it was good to meet up with him, but certainly it was a major coup for Glenavon to get a player like Jerry Armstrong, and it was an honour to be able to play and to be able to say to people today that you actually played alongside Jerry Armstrong on the same team.
That tremendous run at the end of that season, 9 wins and a draw. Ironically, the club defeated Linfield and Glentoran at home, defeated Portadown 2-0 on Easter Saturday, and the only points we dropped were an away game at Bangor at the end of March 1990. Now, we went into the final game, if you recall, against Coleraine at the showgrounds, needing to win and hoping that Portadown would lose or draw their final match against Linfield. We won 3-0, and again, Geoff, you were amongst the goal scorers on that big day. Do you have any memories of that final match at Coleraine?
Yeah, I remember it at Coleraine, my local club, just a few miles away from me, and I do recall how much that match meant. I do recall that we did win it quite comfortably, and I do recall the large amount of fans that were down that day, and even though we didn't win the league that day, they still celebrated and gave us an amazing send-off. But I suppose it was disappointing just to lose the league so narrowly, but that's football for you.
Geoff, tell us about Terry Nicholson and his contribution to the club's success during that period in the late 1980s.
Yeah, well, Terry Nicholson, I'm obviously thankful that Terry gave me the chance in the Irish League. He was the first manager that I played under. And Terry, I suppose I would describe as just one of those old-fashioned type managers who knew what was expected of his players, knew what team to play, the system to play, and he knew the type of player that he wanted at the club as well. He knew the type of player that would have fitted in. If there was a weakness in the squad, Terry seemed to know the type of player that he had to sign just to make the team stronger. But he was certainly instrumental in those early years in us winning the trophies. He was an easy manager to get on with. The changing room was good. There were no issues. Everybody got on well with each other. And when you have a good, happy, hard-working changing room, I think that really helps as well. And I suppose Terry was instrumental, and his backroom staff for getting that. Even our physio, or Jackie Murray's, or team kit men, everybody just got together and just enjoyed the day, enjoyed the atmosphere, and just supported each other and encouraged each other in everything we did.
That 89-90 season, Geoff, the club played 53 games, won 34 and scored 115 goals. And Gary Blackledge was the top scorer. He scored 32 goals in 39 games. Stephen McBride had 24 goals and you had 11. But after 2 tremendous seasons, then, Geoff, you started to have some injury problems. The following 2 seasons, which was 1990-91 and 91-92, you missed, believe it or not, 80 games over those 2 seasons. Tell us about those injury problems.
I do recall getting a bad injury at the Oval against Linfield where I fell on my collarbone and I had to go off. It was dislocated and I actually tried to play the next week because I didn't want to miss a match, but I think after 10 or 15 minutes the pain was so bad that I had to come off. That was a lengthy, maybe 6 or 8 weeks before that got right again. And then I do recall getting a groin injury. And I suppose back in those days, me being me, I probably felt the niggle playing in a few games and I thought I could play through with it. But unknowingly to me, it was making it worse and worse. And to eventually I couldn't play and I had to step out, and it took a long time for that to recover. I could remember, hardly getting in and out of the car because the pain was so bad in my groin. So I seem, of all the injuries that I had, and I didn't have a lot throughout my football career looking back on it, that groin injury for those year or 2 was the one that was sort of holding me back and keeping me from playing week in, week out, and maybe losing a bit of my consistency, losing, my role as a striker. I should have been doing much better than what I was doing, but I suppose the injuries played a major part in that.
And whilst you were struggling with those injuries, Glenavon signed Raymond McCoy. That was in November 1990, and that was the season 1990-91 when the club reached 6 major cup finals, played 64 games and had some tremendous success. Tell us about Raymond. I mean, he was a mercurial talent, a player that supporters just loved to see and loved to watch. What was it like playing with him, as you did a bit later?
Yeah, well, Raymond McCoy was a special player, one of the best about. I actually recall Raymond playing for Coleraine before I was even playing for Glenavon. My dad was a Coleraine supporter, and I would have went to some of the matches there to watch Coleraine, and I remember watching Raymond McCoy from the terracing as a young player, turning fullbacks inside out. And then, of course, him joining Glenavon when I was there was really good. And his ability and his skill and his pace was very exciting for the club. I recall many matches where we took on players for fun and scored goals. I remember one, I think it might have been a semi-final against Ballymena in one of the Irish Cups. I think he picked the ball up away deep in his own half and he ran the whole length of the pitch, and I was actually trying to keep up with him on the other side, hoping that he would pass to me for a tap-in, but he took it on himself and scored, I think, in that semi-final that we won. But he was a great player and such a good person and a great lad, and he was certainly a legend in Glenavon Football Club.
Well, that's certainly true, Geoff. Raymond was one of the best players ever to wear a Glenavon shirt, and as you've said, a lovely person as well, extremely popular with everyone, and it was a real privilege to watch him play. You mentioned that semi-final with Ballymena. We're going to come on to that in a moment, but at that time, Glenavon had McBride, Ferguson, McCoy, 3 outstanding players, all Northern Ireland internationals. Did you feel that you were almost left out, as people used to talk about these 3 hitmen, these 3 tremendous strikers?
No, I suppose I didn't really feel left out back then. If I was playing, I was playing. If I fitted in, I fitted in. And I think I enjoyed seeing so many good strikers playing for the club. I actually do remember another striker coming, Trevor Williamson, who I believe was signed from Raith Rovers possibly. And I remember in a match where I think Terry Nicholson had the five of us on up front on the one time. So I don't know what sort of system he played that day, but I think he had five strikers on the one game. So it was just good to see so many strikers, and it just showed you the type of exciting offensive team we were.
Geoff, you've talked about us as an attacking force. Tell us a bit about the defence at that time.
Yeah, well, I think I stated it before in the interview. You know, when you look back at some of the defenders, the Duncan Lowrys, the Paul Burns, Robbie Beck was a superb goalkeeper. You had then Dean McCulloch coming in to right back. You had Alan McCann was there for a period of time at left back. You had Tony Scappaticci. You know, superb players. You know, great defenders. And I suppose, looking back on it now, as a forward, you probably thought, well, I don't have to rush too far back. The defenders are so good, they're going to clear things up anyway. But yes, certainly Glenavon had a great defence. Look, they had a great defence. They had a really good midfield, full of good midfielders, the Davy Dennisons and the Vinton McConvilles, the Desi McCanns. You know, really, really good midfielders who done a lot of work for the forwards, who would have give you plenty of the ball. So I don't think we had a lot of weaknesses throughout the team. You know, right from goalkeeper right up top, we were a decent team and a decent squad.
So at the end of the second of those two injury-disrupted seasons, Geoff, Glenavon was in the running for the Irish Cup. If you remember, it was the early months of 1992. Glenavon played Glentoran in the first round, in which senior clubs were involved, and drew 0-0. And then there was a replay at Mourneview Park, you'll remember, and Glenavon defeated Glentoran, who were league champions that season, 4-0. Stephen McBride scored a hat-trick. Then we played Ards in the quarter-final and won that game 3-0. And a young 17-year-old striker played that day against Ards, Gerard McMahon. Do you remember Gerard?
Yeah, I remember Gerard coming on the scene, a young fella, full of talent, very pacey, very good on the ball, and it was easy and clear to see that he had a lot going for him, and that he was one of those young, exciting players who quite easily could have got a move over the water. And after a few performances, that worked out really, really well for him. But such a good player and such a nice lad too. In the short time that I had the opportunity to play with him, and then in latter years, after his career, I suppose, in England, I have met him a few times at the club, and it was just good to meet up with him again.
So Glenavon defeated Ards in the quarter-final 3-0. Gerard scored in that game, which took us into the semi-final against Ballymena. Now, you had been injured for virtually the whole season, but Alan Fraser, who was then manager, brought you back for the semi-final. Do you remember the context for that? What led to your recall to the team?
Yeah, I remember being injured and certainly missing key matches in the Irish Cup that I wanted to play in, and I think I was nearly ready to come back, and I think it might have been Stevie McBride picked up an injury and was out of the team, and that allowed me to be fast forwarded back into the team, even though I maybe didn't feel 100% match fitness. But it was just good to get back onto the team and get into those latter games for the Irish Cup final.
Yes, you've mentioned Stephen. He suffered a cruciate ligament injury after the 4-0 victory against Glentoran. Glenn Ferguson was already injured, so that's two of the best strikers in the league at that time, both injured. And Alan brought you back for a league match against Carrick at Mourneview the week before the semi-final against Ballymena, which we won 2-0. You scored both goals. And then the game against Ballymena at Windsor Park. You've already mentioned Raymond McCoy, who scored that sensational goal. Do you have any other memories of that semi-final against Ballymena?
Yeah, just remember the semi-final, such a big match for us, and we wanted to win it so badly to get to an Irish Cup final, because we know what an Irish Cup final is like and how big a day it is for you as a player, for a team, and certainly for the fans. I think the fans, any set of fans, likes to get to an Irish Cup final. And it was a tough game, but when you have people like Ray McCoy who can change games for you, it was good to win it and beat them. And I think Vinton McConville scored 2 that day as well. Another superb midfielder who could run all day for you and gave everything for you and was there to back you all at all times. So Vinty was a great player and was instrumental as well in that semi-final against Ballymena, and it was just great to get the result and get to an Irish Cup final.
Another player missing at that time was Desi McCann, who'd suffered a really bad injury 18 months earlier. And Desi and Finty were kind of a pair, and Finty was still around during that 91-92 season, and as you've said, made an enormous contribution, scoring 2 goals in the semi-final against Ballymena. So victory against Ballymena took us through to the final against Linfield at the Oval. And of course, Glenavon won the game 2-1. What are your memories of that final?
Well, I remember it obviously quite well, a final and a match that we won. I do recall, again, the amazing crowd. I think some people said there could have been 15,000 people. At that game, Linfield always filled the grounds, and certainly for a cup final, the whole halfway round the pitch was just full of Linfield fans. And indeed, Glenavon had a massive support that day, so it was a big occasion. You know, fans were enjoying it, a lot of flags, it was just a good, colourful Irish Cup final. And of course, I think we were a bit edgy, a bit nervousy at the start.
Geoff, you mentioned about the attendance at the final at the Oval. I think the crowd actually was closer to 20,000, and I have a very particular memory of that final. Being in the main grandstand probably 30 minutes before kick-off, I was standing with a Glentoran director who I knew quite well at the time, and we were looking out at the Oval, which was just full of people. And over to the right, the Glentoran end of the stadium, the Glenavon fans, that's where they were. And this friend of mine told me that the Glenavon crowd at that end of the Oval that day was the largest crowd he had seen at that side of the Oval since Glentoran had played Juventus in 1977. I reckon the Glenavon crowd that day was between 8,000 and 10,000. It was probably the biggest crowd ever to leave Lurgan for a football match. You'll recall that the previous year Glenavon had played Portadown in the final at Windsor Park, and I think people that didn't attend the Portadown match heard what a wonderful day it was, even though Glenavon didn't win, and they made a point of attending the final against Linfield. In fact, at that time, I was helping in the club shop, and I remember distinctly that our sales in the shop were nearly 50% higher for the Linfield final than they had been for the Portadown match. So tell us then about the match itself.
Well, just when you're still on about the fans, I think I missed the Portadown final at Windsor through injury, and I actually, because I've missed it, I was so disappointed about missing an Irish Cup final. I just went and paid my way in and stood with the fans in the Kop and watched the match just as a fan. And yes, it was disappointing to lose that. But then the Irish Cup final against Linfield, I do remember clearly even before the game at Lurgan, the send-off we as a team had was amazing that day. The crowds surrounding us, I suppose getting their autographs and getting pictures and whatever, and give us an amazing send-off and the team bus up to the Oval that day. But yes, the match itself then, yeah, Linfield, at some stage they took the lead. We're playing well and certainly we're in top we were struggling to get to grips with the game. Fortunately, I think for us, after they scored, the fans actually invaded the pitch, and we had to be taken off for maybe 5 or 10 minutes to allow the police to get the fans off. And when the match restarted, Linfield's game actually, I believe, deteriorated, and we started to play a bit better. And we got a wee bit more involved in the game, and of course we got the equaliser. And coming in at half time, 1 each, we knew all was there to play for, and there was a chance that we could do something in this game.
Geoff, tell us about the equaliser. You scored it.
Yeah. Of the few goals I scored, I always seemed to manage to score in a cup final, which was interesting. But I do remember the goal. It wasn't a magnificent goal. It was a goal with a bit of good play, and I think it came through possibly from Dean McCulloch at right back. He had slipped the ball through, and I just turned, seen the goalkeeper, and just placed it past the keeper. And of course that gave us a lift and lifted the crowd and got the crowd even more behind us. So yeah, I do remember that goal quite well.
So the second half then, Glenavon was attacking the City end, I think, and obviously we scored what proved to be the winner. Do you remember the winning goal?
Yeah, I do remember. It came from a free stick. In fact, I think the free kick was against me, and we were lining up to hit it. We weren't sure who was going to hit it, if it was going to be me or Jared or somebody else. But I think Jared says he was going to hit it. And I remember I did walk into the box area to hang about for a loose ball or a rebound or whatever. But he hit it well. I think it maybe took a slight deflection. But who cares? It was a goal. It was in the back of the net. And it certainly proved to be the winner. Although I think we did hang on near the end of that game. Linfield being such a good, strong team, they piled a lot of pressure on us in the last few minutes. I do recall I got a bad injury. In that final, the keeper come out and I got a bad stud in the knee. I tried to play on for a few minutes, but it was impossible. So in the last few minutes, having been taken off with the injury, I do recall sitting in the dugout with Kenny Bell and Alan Fraser and just watching Linfield attack after attack and the ball going narrowly by the post and being saved by Robbie Beck or whatever. But it was really good to hear that final whistle, and it meant that the Irish Cup, such a great trophy, that Glenavon had actually won the Irish Cup by defeating Linfield that day.
Do you remember that Linfield actually scored in the closing moments and the goal was disallowed for handball? I remember this particularly because the referee that day was Davy McGill. And Davy, I knew Davy quite well. I used to meet him when I worked in Belfast. We used to bump into each other quite often. And Davy had a lovely way with players. I remember, he would have spoken to players and had a great rapport with them. But the Linfield player controlled the ball with his wrist and shot into the net. And Paul Byrne immediately saw it was a handball, but very few other people in the stadium saw the handball. But Davy saw it, crucially, and he disallowed the goal. There was quite a bit of controversy about it at the time, but the TV pictures showed that it clearly had been a handball. Geoff and I are just looking at some still photographs from the 92 final. Do you see any photographs, Geoff, that particularly catch your eye?
Well, one of the big things that's catching my eye is the crowd, really. And no matter if you look at the Glenavon crowd or the Linfield crowd, no matter what photograph you look at it, it's packed. The ground is packed. And it was such a good day. And there's a photo of actually me scoring the equaliser. And there's Raymond McCoy, again, taking on two players. And they're us receiving the trophy. I think is that Paul Byrne or Vinty McConville? And there's the photograph actually where I get injured by the keeper who came out and caught my knee. That put me in serious agony that night and prevented me from celebrating maybe the way I wanted to celebrate.
Some fantastic photographs, Geoff, of a remarkable day. Do you remember the the victory parade which the club held in Lurgan a few days after the final?
I think I actually missed that. Possibly to do with my pain in my leg and maybe a work commitment or something, but I believe I might have missed that one.
That victory parade was interesting because Lurgan had been bombed 2 months before the final. So the bus carrying the team went through the town centre amidst basically the wreckage caused by the bomb. And at that time, BBC in London sent a camera crew to film the victory parade because it was such an incongruous sight of this football team with hundreds and hundreds of supporters on the streets celebrating this win amidst basically the ruins of a town. So, 92, winning the Irish Cup meant qualification for the European Cup Winners' Cup, and Glenavon was drawn against a top Belgian First Division club, Royal Antwerp. The first game was at Lurgan in September 1992 when Glenavon drew 1-1 with the Belgians. At that time, Glenavon was still struggling with injuries. Stephen McBride was still out. Glenn Ferguson was back. But in that first game, Glenavon's equaliser was scored by Sammy Smith, who was almost a fourth or fifth choice striker, but he managed to get the crucial goal 5 minutes before the end to draw the first game. So the team then travelled to Belgium 2 weeks later for the return leg. What are your memories of the night in Antwerp?
Yeah, I remember that match quite well, playing against such a big club like Antwerp. And you were still in the game, the fact that we drew your first match. I do recall, I think Antwerp had maybe even a player signed that they'd signed for like £1 million or something. So in those days, it was actually a lot of money. So they were a big side. They had internationals playing. There was a guy, the number 5 at the back. He was their captain, Schmitz, I think he was called, and he actually was playing he was a Belgium international, and he was actually marking me. I got his shirt after the match. I still have it. In fact, recently, a reporter from Belgium rang me about the match and my memories about it because it was an anniversary. But it was a great game. Unfortunately, we lost it in the end. We had a player sent off at some stage, Michael Crowe, I believe it was. But to hold such a good team and take them to penalty kicks certainly was a major achievement for us. And sadly, we lost the game on penalty kicks. I do have some memory of Antwerp actually missing maybe their first penalty, and I thought here we have a great chance of going on, but sadly a few of us missed. I don't like taking penalties. I didn't take a penalty. I do recall actually scoring the equaliser in that match. It was the ball that came out to the edge of the box, and I could see that the keeper was off his line, and there was a defender closing me down. And I thought the only thing I can do here is try and lob everybody. So I did do a lob, and it went over the defender, right over the keeper, and dropped down in the back of the net, which was quite a good goal, I suppose by my standards. But sadly we lost the match, but it certainly was a memorable match for Glenavon, and so close to getting into the next round, because I believe Royal Antwerp did really well. They might have even got to the final that year. So it just shows you how well we actually did do against a great side.
Geoff, you're too modest. That goal was one of the most sensational goals I remember watching Glenavon. To give you the context, we were a goal down in the second half. Michael Crowe was sent off after about 65 minutes. And so we had to play the last 25 minutes with 10 men against, a top Belgian First Division side. And you scored that goal in the 80th minute. An absolutely amazing lob over the keeper from 20 plus yards. And then to go into extra time, handicapped with the loss of a player, We didn't even have a full-strength team that night, and to take the game to penalties was astonishing. It's probably Glenavon's best ever result in European competition. I know we defeated Mold back in 2018 at home in the Europa League, but I don't think the Mold result would compare with a draw in the circumstances away to a club like Royal Antwerp. Antwerp, as you've said, went all the way to the final that year at Wembley Stadium. They played Parma of Italy and I think lost 3-1, but it was an astonishing performance. Tell us about that extra time period. How did we manage to hold on and take the game to penalties?
I don't know. I think it just shows you the calibre of players that we had playing. There were guys who were prepared to roll their sleeves up, and even though playing against such a great side and down to 10 men, everybody just buckled in together and gave everything, gave 110%. I can recall running back, diving into tackles and probably making foul after foul, anything to break the game up. And I suppose as the game went on in extra time, we knew our best chance was to hold it to penalty kicks, that the pressure we were under, it was unlikely that we were going to score. So everybody was really behind the ball, that we were parking the bus, as they say. And it was just a real gritty, hard performance by players who were just prepared to give their all for the club. We had travelled such a distance, we were doing so well, and we just weren't going to give in easily. And I think Antwerp knew they were in a game that night.
That is certainly true, Geoff. As I said, it was a remarkable performance and a remarkable result. So that was the 92-93 season, which was a season when we really underachieved. We didn't compete for the league championship that season. But the following season, 93-94, your final season at the club, of course, we took the league championship to the final game against Portadown. You were injured, I think. But do you have any memories of that day at Mourneview when we played Portadown?
I just have a vague memory, and of course the fact that you're not playing, it sort of lessens a wee bit the memories of it. But again, so close to doing so well. But Portadown, we must hand it to Portadown. They were a strong side, in those years as well. The Alfie Stewarts, the Strains, the Mickey Keenans, the Roy McCreadys, and the Sandy Frasers. They were just a bit like ourselves. They were strong in defence. They had great midfielders. They had great forwards. So, they were big games against Portadown. And, of course, they had a great manager in Ronnie McFall as well. And it was just so close again, just to achieving and winning a major trophy, but it just didn't work out for us.
Tell us a bit about Alan Fraser, one of the nice men of football, and his contribution to the team's success, particularly winning the Irish Cup in 1992.
Yeah, well, Alan Fraser, another great person, great manager, and obviously a great footballer as well. And I suppose he came in, took over the reins, and it was important for him to continue that success and continue us playing well and continuing to battle for trophies. And again, he knew the team, he knew the players, and he knew what he wanted out of us. And it's a guy who I've met over the years, and have seen him and met him at a lot of Northern Ireland matches. We used to sit quite close to each other in the Cop watching Northern Ireland games. And we would have had good chats and about the memories of Glenavon and the different players when we had met up at Windsor Park.
Geoff, during your time at Glenavon, we always had a matchday programme. In fact, we had a matchday programme for nearly over 20 unbroken seasons. And I was programme editor during the latter part of your period with us. And during the 93-94 season, I had a little feature in the programme occasionally called Spy in the Camp, when I surreptitiously spoke to the wife or girlfriend of one of the players, and they told me a little about their man. So at the end of that 93-94 season, I spoke to Karen, your wife, and she shared some things about you. So for a bit of light relief, I'm going to read what Karen said. This is what I wrote in March 1994. Karen and Geoff Ferris have known each other since childhood. He lived 5 doors away from me at home. Spying the camp, Karen explained. We started off as good friends, then things developed between us, and now we're married. The Limavady couple have been together for 7 years now, 3 as husband and wife. Karen is very proud of her husband. He's a lovely big fellow, she proclaimed with a sharp Limavady twang. My mum thinks the world of him as well. She says he's the perfect son-in-law. Now, before you reach for the sick bags, even this lovely big fellow has his faults. He can't cook, Karen stated flatly. He makes toast and can boil an egg, but that's the height of it. But after the meal is over, does he volunteer to wash up? Virtually never, but he can be cajoled into doing the pots and pans on a Sunday. Washing clothes is another area in which Geoff scores low marks. Karen continued, but if I'm going out and leave instructions for him to hang up the wet clothes when the washing machine is finished, he can normally do that all right. Does he have the common sense to bring clothes in off the line if it starts to rain? Yes, she said, perhaps surprisingly for a man, he's sensible enough that way. The next step after washing and drying the clothes is to iron them. Again, Geoff scores disappointing marks. Normally you would never see him at the ironing board, but on one occasion after I'd been in hospital, I saw him smoothing a pair of jeans. She said, I was so taken aback that I grabbed the camera and took a picture. So Geoff, this was a bit of fun at the time. Just on the subject of the programme, my memory is I used to leave the programmes into the dressing room maybe at 2 o'clock on a home match day, and the players would have sat and read the programme for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and the programme seemed to give the players a lot of pleasure, and there was often a lot of ribbing about things that appeared in the programme, like this article. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember the programmes vividly, and I do recall we did enjoy reading them and flicking through them for those 5 or 10 minutes before things got serious in the changing room. You know, the programmes were well put together. They contained a lot of information. It was something new every week. For example, you talking to my wife. And by the way, George, things haven't really changed since that interview. But we're still together anyway, even though I still don't cook or iron. But no, the programmes were very good. In fact, they were so good that I kept, and I still have, quite a lot of them. And recently, I dug some of them out of a box to give to my nephew's young fella who now live in Belfast, my brother's son's son. He's a real keen interest in football and a real keen interest in old programmes. And he thought it was very interesting reading about Glenavon and about, obviously, me playing a bit for Glenavon. And I give him a few of the programmes with him. So if I did find one of them in a box, I would take great delight in reading over it and flicking through it, just to recall the memories of those days, to recall the players and who were part of the team and how we were actually doing in those games.
So, Geoff, it's been fascinating over the last hour or more, reminiscing, walking down memory lane, remembering those wonderful days that you spent at Glenavon. Is there one particular memory that stands out over that 6-year period?
Well, there's a few good memories, I suppose. I think the one that really sticks out, I suppose, is scoring the hat-trick in the final against Linfield. That's the one that seems to come up quite often with people of my generation. Certainly talking to players who played in that game, people connected, I suppose, to Glenavon when I bump into some of them. And it was such a great game for for Glenavon to win, and of course scoring the hat-trick, it just made it that wee bit special for me. And of course winning the Irish Cup against Linfield in front of such a large crowd, and that being such a special day as well. And again, having the opportunity to play in Europe and travelling to some of the countries and playing against some teams was quite unique as well. And looking back on it now, I suppose it is nice to say that you were able to play in European competitions for an Irish League club.
Geoff, thanks very much for the time you've given us and for all the wonderful memories you've shared. We're now going to move on, and we're going to travel to your church, and we're going to talk about faith.
Oh, the lads, you should have seen us coming. The greatest team in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the town we go. Robbie in the goal, the team one's got me running. Nights with Ginger and Bernsey, you should have seen them coming. 50 Stevie, Michael and Brad, fighting for their places. Dirty Tiff and Brady, the autumn on the aces. Oh, the lads, you should have seen us coming. The greatest team in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the town we go to see the Morphy Aces. Oh, the lads, you should have seen us coming. The greatest team in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the town we go to see the Morphy Aces.
We are now at Baltea Presbyterian Church. Geoff, tell us a bit about Baltea. First of all, location-wise, how far are we out of Limavady?
Well, it's very much a rural church. It's in a lovely setting about 3 miles outside of Limavady on the Dungiven side, quite close to a small village called Drumcerne. It's situated very much in a farming community area, and in fact a lot of the congregation would be local farmers who would attend the church.
We're sitting in the pew which you sat in with your parents growing up. Was church always part of your life as a young person?
Yeah, certainly church and Sunday school was part of my life. I am grateful and very thankful for parents who sent me to Sunday school, sent me to church. My mum was a committed Christian. My father at that time wasn't, but he was very supportive of my mum and us to make sure that we went to Sunday school and we went to church. I do recall vividly coming to Sunday school here, quite a large Sunday school, up in 70 or 80 young people coming to Sunday school and being taught the stories of the Bible by great teachers who attended this church and sadly now have passed into eternity.
Before we talk about your faith journey, Geoff, tell us a bit more about the church. Who is the minister? What sort of numbers do you get on a Sunday morning?
Our minister at the minute is the Reverend Gary Atchison. Before that it was John Noble. Gary must be here now some 7 or 8 years. Came through the COVID crisis that we had. Numbers have always been good in the church. We have quite a big congregation. I think personally and sadly COVID hit our numbers. People get used to listening to services online, and I think that has hit our numbers a bit as well since we've returned after COVID. You know, but the church has a lot of organisations. They've got their Girls' Brigade, they've got a Sunday school, we've got a youth fellowship, we've got a senior citizens, we've got PW, And we have a men's group, so there's a bowling club. There's a lot of organisations connected to the church which keeps the people together and gelling together as a congregation.
And how important is the church in your life?
Well, the church is important to me. I mean, I'm a Christian, and it really doesn't matter if I'm a Presbyterian or a Methodist or a Baptist or whatever. It's just a label. I'm a Christian, a person who's put their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. But being brought up in this church, I have a passion for the church. I have a passion to see people come to know the Lord Jesus. I'm involved in, I suppose, quite a bit in the church. I'm a committee member. I'm now an elder. I teach in Sunday school. I'm part of the youth fellowship, setting it up again, and I'm there in the background for the young leaders. I take our GB girls' scripture on a Friday night, and I just try to be involved as much as I can. I have that love for the church. I have a love for our Saviour, and I want to see people putting their faith and putting their trust in the Lord Jesus.
You've said that you're an elder. What is the role of an elder in the Presbyterian tradition?
Yeah, well, I've recently become an elder, I suppose now, at the last intake, just a few years, so I'm quite young and raw in relation to my job as an elder, but it's a very important role and a role that I don't take lightly. But you're there to support the congregation, and I have a responsibility for a number of the families connected to the church that I would speak to and visit on occasions. And we meet as elders together to discuss certain things in the running of the church. And we have some very good elders here in our church who work together to make sure that our congregation are happy at our church, and we want to see them coming to church, we want to see them enjoying church, and we want to see them being involved in the church and having particular roles in the church, whether that's in our Bible study or a leader in an organisation, or just coming to be part of the organisation, the different organisations. So it is an important role, and it's a role that I'm learning on a weekly basis.
The minister in the Presbyterian tradition, is he a teaching elder?
Yeah, he is a teaching elder, and certainly if we have a meeting, our minister is always there leading the meetings. So he has an important role to play in relation to what we do, how we do it. He was involved in the training of me and a couple of the other new elders over a period of time up in the manse, and we had a very good time learning about the role and how to deal with certain situations and what we should be doing and this type of thing.
So let's go back, Geoff. You've told us that you grew up in this church. You were involved in the youth organisations. Do you have any particular memories of those times?
Yeah, I do recall growing up in the church. I suppose the organisation that I was really attached to would have been the Boys' Brigade in the church. We had a big Boys' Brigade led at that time by our minister, the Reverend James Clark. He celebrated 60 years in ministry there this year, and we had a wee get-together for him last Sunday. And I recall him leading our Boys' Brigade, and we had a great group of boys, and important for me, we had a great football team. And we would have won many of the local tournaments that the Boys' Brigade played in or participated in way back in those days.
So when you were a Glenavon player back in the late 80s and the 90s, did you attend church? How did your faith journey begin?
Well, when I joined Glenavon, I was working in Belfast and living in Belfast. But when I travelled home, I suppose on the Sunday I would have attended church. But at that time I wasn't a committed Christian. When I joined Glenavon, I suppose I believed in God. I was aware that there was a God. I knew you needed to have a personal faith, a personal commitment. And I knew myself, because of the way that I was brought up, that I didn't have that that different things were holding me back, the things of the world, whether that was my football, my job, or whatever. I suppose I had more interest in that than coming to a personal faith with God. But the church was still important to me. And even though I wasn't a Christian, I still would have attended church. I still would have read my Bible. But deep down, I knew that wasn't enough for me to be accepted by the Lord Jesus as one of his children.
And how did you come to faith? How did you establish a relationship with Jesus?
Yeah, it wasn't until 1993, I suppose, during just my latter time at Glenavon. I had since got married to my wife Karen, and we were living locally now in Limavady. I was working up in Londonderry, Stroke Derry, and there was the Faith Mission, had a number of missions in the area, conducted by Brian and Julianne Spence, I recall. And I started to attend these meetings, and I felt through their preaching, I felt that the Lord's Spirit was starting to work on me, and I felt challenged. And it was back then in 1993 that I accepted that I wanted to live closer to God and put my full trust in him.
And taking that step of committing your life to the Lord Jesus, what difference did that make on a sort of day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
Well, it certainly made a difference. My focus more, I suppose, was on living a life that was pleasing to God and trying to show God's love to other people. It's not an easy life when you become a Christian. I'm sure, as most people know, it doesn't make everything rosy. There's still challenges. There's still things that get you down. But knowing that God's there helping you through every situation, and knowing that if there's issues or problems that you can just kneel down and pray to God and ask for help and assistance in it. So it was just having that closer walk with God and starting to, I suppose, read my Bible more, and I attend more Bible studies and prayer meetings and things like that, just to try and keep on fire for the Lord.
You've mentioned that at times life can be rocky and challenging. Have there been any particular challenges in your life, in the lives of your family, where you felt God has been particularly close?
I suppose there has been a number of times that I suppose you're hit with the storms of life, in your own family and the wider family circle. And I suppose on one occasion, my eldest daughter, Keziah, who was only about 13 at the time, she had a period of headaches, which we didn't think a lot of. But it turned out, to cut a long story short, to be a brain tumour. And that was at Christmas time, and we had to go to the Royal with her and spend a number of days there awaiting results. And she went through a very lengthy operation to remove a brain tumour. So those were very difficult days. She had a long recovery after that. But thankfully, she came out of that, and through further checks and scans, everything, she's been given the all clear. But those were difficult days and difficult times, but very thankful. I'm now sitting in Baltia Presbyterian Church. The church had a prayer meeting in the morning of the surgery, where a large number of our congregation here attended that prayer meeting and sat and earnestly prayed for us as a family and for Keziah. And I have no doubt that power of prayer brought Keziah through and brought myself and Karen through as parents through a very difficult time.
You've been a Christian, as you've told us, for over 30 years. How do you sustain your faith over such a long period?
Well, you just have to keep going, I suppose, and it's good to have other Christians and associate with other Christians who help you, support you, encourage you. And I do spend, as I say, a lot of time, going to Bible study, different prayer meetings, going to different churches, and I suppose being involved now in some of the organisations like Sunday school. It is an honour to teach in Sunday school. And even being a teacher, you're learning more and more about God as well, because you're learning and you're reading the stories in a way that God would want you to put over to the young people. So that helps you in your walk with God to keep you going.
And how important is the support you receive from the congregation here?
Well, the congregation are very good, and they see what's going on in the background with their youth and their Sunday school, and we have a carol service now coming up on the 21st of December involving the Sunday school and their young people, and the congregation love to see the young people taking part. And even with my chaplaincy at the football club, I was given the opportunity to outline to the congregation what the role of chaplaincy was at the football club, and asked them just to obviously keep me in prayer in relation to that new role that I had took on.
And how did that call to chaplaincy come about?
Well, again, that was something completely out of the blue. It's something I suppose that I probably didn't know a lot about. And we talked about Glenavon earlier on, and I don't have any memories of a chaplain at Glenavon in my playing days, or certainly I had no contact with them anyway. But it came about, I suppose, through Philip Mitchell, who was a good player here in the Irish League and was over at Ipswich Town. And he was the head of the chaplaincy in Ireland here. And he was really driving it forward over the last number of years in relation to getting Christians, people with faith, to get involved in their football clubs. And he had contacted me a few times. And I certainly know initially when he contacted me, I said, Philip, I don't have time, I'm involved in this and that, I don't have time for chaplaincy. But Philip, being Philip, he didn't give up, he kept at me, and I suppose I prayed about it and thought about it and chatted to others about it, and decided that maybe this was God's calling to be a chaplain at my local club, Limavady, who I played for in the past, and who I was still involved with. I was actually in the committee and all at the club when I took on the role as chaplaincy just a few years ago.
And do you enjoy the chaplaincy role?
Yeah, it's different. It's a role that I think will take a long time to get really into it. It's a role. It's not like witnessing, I suppose, in your church or somewhere else. You're very much in the background being a chaplain. You're there, you're a listening ear. You do something, I suppose, when needed, when required. Sometimes you might just be standing, watching them training. Maybe you're there when they meet an hour and a half before match days, just to show your presence. And then you have times and you have opportunities to speak to some of the players and backroom staff individually about certain things, about difficulties, about issues. And not only the players themselves or the management, we have a large amount of supporters and staff, and as a chaplain, you're there for them all. And you want to show them support and encouragement when they're going through difficult times. Because you see footballers, you see these young players on a Saturday playing football for 90 minutes and they're winning a match and they're scoring goals and you see all the happy faces. But who knows what's going on in the background? There could be issues there could be family issues, there could be financial issues, there could be health issues. There's loads of things going on in people's lives. They're young footballers, but they're human beings and they face the same difficulties as me and you face, as they grow up. So it's important as a chaplain to be there and to recognise that and maybe try and encourage them and support them and help them when the opportunity arises.
Did you do any training for the role of chaplain?
Yeah, you go through a process, an induction training course up at Windsor Park. And go through, throughout the year, there's conferences held at Windsor Park where different chaplains would come and attend, even ones from England, from the different teams like Aston Villa or whoever. They would come and chat about their experiences. We have quite a few chaplains now with the League of Ireland clubs, some really good chaplains down there involved, and they would come up and give their experiences. And it is really good to see that, most clubs here, most of the Irish League clubs, Championship clubs, intermediate clubs, all have chaplains, all have born-again Christians fulfilling the role of chaplain at their club, which is great to see.
If there had been a chaplain at Glenavon during your playing days, do you think that would have been a positive thing?
Yeah, I think it would have been nice, and certainly with my upbringing, I would have felt very comfortable, maybe chatting to him and spending some time with him and getting to know him. I think my first dealings with a chaplain was when I was assistant manager at Coleraine. Robert McMullen was the chaplain, and I had good conversations with him, and he would have got me involved with some of the services that he was conducting in Coleraine, and he was getting players and different ones involved in services. But it's good to see now that most clubs have a chaplain, whereas way back, maybe in my days playing, there might have been very few, and those that were chaplains were probably more ministers or priests or whatever they were in those days, whereas now it's the ordinary person in the street, male or female, who is just a born-again Christian who's went through the induction courses and the skills needed to be a chaplain.
Geoff, it's been wonderful to hear about your church and about your faith journey. We're now going to go back to Limavady and spend a few minutes at the showgrounds and learn more about the success the club is having at the moment and your contribution.
Oh, the lads, you should have seen us coming. The greatest thing in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the Tannery Road to see the Morphy Aces. There's Robbie in the goal, the Phoenix got me running. Nights with Junior and Bernsey, you should have seen them coming. 50 Stevie, Michael and Brad fighting for their places. Dirty Jeff and Ravy, they are the Morphy Aces. You should have seen us coming. The greatest team in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the Tannery Road to see the Morphy Aces. Oh, the lads, you should have seen us coming. The greatest team in the Irish League, you should have seen us coming. All the lads and lassies, smiles upon their faces, walking down the Tannery Road to see the Morphy Aces.
We've now moved to the Limavady showgrounds, and Geoff's going to talk to us a little about his role at the club here and about the success which Limavady is having at the moment. Geoff, you mentioned about your role on the committee. When did you join the committee and how did that all come about?
Well, I suppose I've always had a close affiliation with Limavady United Football Club. It's my local team. I've been brought up in Limavady. It's my hometown. And the early 80s I would have played for them before joining the police team. And in fact, their last year in 1983-84, I think the photograph's up on the wall there, George, we actually won the old B division then. So I've close connections to the club, obviously being away and living away and working away and playing for the police and playing for Glenavon and working with other teams. I wasn't as much involved until more lately when I got a number of years ago involved in the committee, just really as a committee member and helping out a wee bit in the background. And I suppose my first step up in the committee was really taking on the role as chaplain there about 2 to 3 years ago. And that got me a wee bit more involved in the welfare of the club, more of the pastoral and spiritual welfare of all those connected to the club. And to be fair to the club, they've taken me on board and has accepted the role of chaplaincy as very important. And the manager, Paul Owens and his backroom staff, Neil Mullen and different ones, all guys that I know. In fact, Paul Owens and Neil Mullen, the manager and the assistant manager, played under me at Tobermore as manager. So that was a benefit to me as a chaplain, having a good relationship with them. And we still have a really good relationship, and we can talk to each other, and we have full trust in each other in everything we do.
Now, you've recently taken on the role of chairman. How did that come about?
Well, that came out of the blue as well, and it's a role that I probably didn't ever see or foresee me taking on. The role of chaplaincy was enough for me at the club. But it happened quite suddenly, quite quickly there at the end of last season when the last chairman resigned and stood down for other reasons. And I was asked then by a number of people, including the manager, would I consider taking on the role as chairman? And initially said there was just no way, I didn't have the time. But they kept talking to me and asking me would I do it, and I said, well, I'd maybe do it short term anyway to keep things ticking over in the continuity of the club, because we were going well, we were playing well. We narrowly missed out on a playoff last season. So I said I would take on the role as chairman in the meantime to keep things going. And the club has been very progressive this year. The team are doing well. They're joint top with Anna, and we are playing well. We have some great players at the team with Irish League experience. We've got Stevie and Philip Lurie now both at the club. We have players of the calibre of Rodney Brown, Adam Mullen. And we have some very good young players, the young Borman twins. We have John Butcher. We have young boy Tosh, Jake Martin. There's a really good mix of players at the club. And we do have ambitions of getting into the Premiership to play the likes of the Linfields and the Glentorns and of course the Glenavons. But we've a tough season to complete to get near that. But if we keep playing the way we're playing, there is a chance that we could win the league, or indeed we could get into a playoff position by the end of the season.
You mentioned about, obviously, your role as chairman and being on the committee. How many people are on the committee, and how often do you meet, and what are your duties, for example, on a home match day?
Well, there's about 8 or 9 of us on the committee. We meet monthly just to discuss a whole raft of issues involving the club, whether it's team issues, player issues, and then, of course, sponsorship, the finances of the club, the running of the club. And we have a great venture now with our new pitch. We've had funding for a new 4G pitch, and that has just commenced, George, there, as you can see outside with the diggers there last week. So all being well, we will have a complete new pitch by the end of March, which will be a game changer for us as a club, because it means we'll be able to do all our training here. We have a really good youth academy here. We've got a ladies team. So it means the whole focus of the club will now be here at the grounds. They'll be able to train here every night of the week. So there'll be a wee bit more of a buzz about the place. We'll be able to play a lot more matches on the pitch. I mean, at the minute, our under-21s are playing here, there and everywhere. So it'll be good to have them playing, whether it be a Friday night or a Saturday morning before our game. So as a committee, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to keep on top of. We have quite a few functions. You can see we have a big hall here. We have quite a few people coming into birthday parties or various events, renting the hall out. So things are going well both on and indeed off the field at the minute.
You've mentioned there about the new 4G pitch. Was there any opposition to moving to a synthetic pitch amongst the committee?
No, there was no opposition at all. I mean, if we had a perfect grass pitch out there with really good drainage, everything, I don't think we would even question or ask about a 4G. I think playing on grass is hard to beat. However, if you look at the pitch out there now, when it comes into sort of November, December, and a lot of heavy rain, the pitch gets heavy. It affects the football from the guys on a Saturday, and you're having matches maybe cancelled or postponed, or you have groundsmen doing a lot of work on the pitch. And I think when you weigh up all those issues there, I think the way forward has to be the 4G, certainly for the running of the club. Because even in our league, I think probably half the teams now are playing on the plastic surfaces. Yes, and I know there's probably debates and arguments about, is it the way forward? Are there more injuries? You know, I don't know. But certainly for us as a club, we think that the way forward would be the way we're going with this 4G pitch.
So, Geoff, Limavady at home games, how many spectators would the club normally have? How many would you take to away games? And thirdly, what's the standard in the Championship?
Well, the standard in the Championship is quite good. I mean, I go to most home and away matches. I've seen all the teams playing now in the Championship, and they are all very decent, strong, good teams. Very little difference between the team at the bottom and the team at the top. Any team will give you a game. If you underperform at all against the team that's sitting at the bottom, you will lose points. So it is a tight league, very competitive, very good players, a lot of good experienced players playing in the Championship. But, you know, we're doing well holding our own, and as a result of us playing well and having a good team and a good blend of youth and experience, the people in the community are coming out to support us. We're a very community-based club. And if it was a good day, playing Institute or a local derby or one of the bigger teams who are up with you near the top, you could have up in 500 people, you know, at a home game, which for Limavady is very good. I can remember the days when I was playing, there might have been 30 watching us out there on a cold winter's day. But we do have good attendances, certainly at home, and we do have good travelling support as well. You know, there's quite a few would make some of the long journeys to, whether it's to Anna or the Welders or even Newry. You know, you'll find 30 or 40, 50 people going to some of the away matches.
Why has the team done particularly well over the last couple of years? I'm thinking about, for example, the Irish Cup win against Larne here last season, and obviously at the moment the team's at the very top of the Championship.
I think last year was a really good season in the Irish Cup. Beating Larne here was a massive result for us. It's a match I missed. I actually was away that weekend, but it was an unbelievable result to beat a full-time team like Larne, and then drawing Crusaders in the next round, and giving a really good account of ourselves at Seaview. Crusaders scored in the last few minutes to win the game. We were very close to extra time. But having a good team, I suppose a lot of that's down to the hard work off the pitch from, I suppose, the board, but more particularly the management team. We have a very good management team. We have a good young manager in Paul Owens, who puts a lot of work on the training field into his team, and he can draw good players to the club. And we have probably 2 or 3 really good experienced players here at the minute who probably could still play in the Irish League, but they're happy here and they're enjoying their football and playing well with Limavady.
Are most of the players from the Northwest?
Yeah, they're nearly all from the Northwest. There's several of them from the town here. There's a few of them from up the road in Derry. There's a couple from Korean, you know, just the Ardicliffe, just the outlying areas. They're all fairly local players. I don't think there's anybody from away over Belfast or anywhere that type of area. They're all local based players.
I believe, Geoff, that your brother is also on the board of directors here at Limavady. Can you tell us a bit about his involvement?
Yeah, my brother has recently joined the board. He's very passionate about Limavady Football Club. He is a young cub who plays for wee Oscar, plays for the academy. A very good footballer he is. But my brother Jason is part of the board and is very keen to be part of it and does a lot of hard work behind the scenes. In fact, he was instrumental in our big lunch there a few weeks ago. The last home match on our old grass pitch, we had 120 people in here for a lunch and had a really good day together. So it's good to have him on a board, and it's good to have somebody who I know maybe a wee bit better than the rest of the members of the board.
Has the board started to think about the possibility of promotion and making preparations for that?
Yeah, we are looking ahead. We have to look ahead. When we get the new pitch down, we will be fairly advanced in meeting all the requirements. There will be a few bits and pieces that would have to be completed, maybe in relation to seating or whatever. But if we were successful to get in to the Premiership, we would be confident that our good friends in Korean are going to allow us to play there for a period of time until we tick all the boxes to be able to be back playing here in Limavady again.
Which clubs do you see as offering the biggest challenge to Limavady in your efforts to secure a place in the Premiership?
Well, as I say, they're all good clubs, they're all good teams. The teams that I suppose feel that they will be challenging are Anna, which would be one of the local teams up near you, I think just outside Portadown. Anna were so close last year, they get beat by Carrick in the playoff. You have Paul Key's team, Harlan Wolf Welders, a good, strong side capable of beating most teams in the league. Queens was the last team we played there on Saturday away. I was up watching Queens, very good, young side, loads of ability, very fit. They're going to be in the mix. Those are the teams that certainly are up and around that challenging position at the minute.
Geoff, we're almost at the end. Tell me, what does Christmas mean to you? What are your memories of Christmas, even growing up?
Well, I had good memories of Christmas growing up. You know, they were always very happy times growing up, looking forward to our Christmas dinner and our presents and with my own mum and dad and brothers and sisters. And so Christmas was always a time that we looked forward to. I looked forward to when I was a young person. I still look forward to Christmas. I enjoy Christmas. I enjoy the atmosphere. I enjoy people being off work, having fun, families meeting up, and of course our Christmas dinner. But I think it is really important to focus on what Christmas is really about, and it is about the birth of the Lord Jesus. You know, and we don't want to be like the innkeeper, I suppose. When Mary and Joseph were looking for a place to stay for the birth of Jesus, the innkeeper, there was no room for them. And, you know, so many people today have no room for Jesus in their lives, and certainly at Christmas time. And I think it is very important during the Christmas time that we have room for Jesus and that we focus on Jesus and we keep that central to our enjoyment of Christmas. And it is good to have gifts, and it is good to celebrate, and it is good to meet up with family. But we should not forget about the real meaning, that it is all about the Lord Jesus and his birth and him coming here to set an example for us all.
Do you have a favourite Christmas carol?
Well, I'm not a great singer, George. I like music. I like a lot. I listen to a lot of Christian music. Listen to a lot of "You're in Christ Alone," "How Deep the Father's Love," and "Holy Forever," and all that. I do like the Christmas carols. Probably my favourite Christmas carol would be "Once in Royal," David City. It's one of the oldies, and we probably sing it in our church every Christmas. And it's just plain and simple about the birth of Jesus, and I just like the tune of it, and I like the words, and I just like when there's a congregation singing it vibrantly out there in church.
So, Geoff, do you have any final thoughts just before we finish?
Well, I'm very thankful to Glenavon Football Club for giving me the opportunity to play in the Irish League. I really enjoyed my seasons there. I enjoyed being part of the club. I enjoyed being part of the success. I met some great players, some great people, and some great fans who I still see and make contact with on a regular basis. And George, you as well. I can remember my playing days in Glenavon. I remember you supporting the club and being very passionate about the club. And it's good to see that you're still passionate about the club. And you're one of these guys who has all the photographs, who has all the statistics, and knows more about my playing days and my games than I do myself. So clubs like Glenavon need people like you, George. And I would like to wish you and the Glenavon team and the whole supporters a very happy Christmas. And I trust and pray that they will be successful in staying in the Irish League this season.
Thanks very much, Geoff. We're going to finish by hearing Beth Gibson, a young Glenavon supporter, sing your favourite carol, Once in Royal David City. Beth is 13. She celebrated her 13th birthday a few days ago. She's a Year 9 pupil at Banbridge Academy and is the granddaughter of Eddie Tate, who is a lifelong supporter and a season ticket holder. So Beth, thanks very much for singing for us. Thank you again, Geoff, for your time, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of our supporters and to football supporters everywhere.
Once in Royal David City stood a lowly cattle shed, where a mother laid her baby in a manger for his bed. Mary was that mother mild, Jesus Christ, a little child. He came down to earth from heaven, who is God and Lord of all, and his shelter was a stable, and his cradle was a stall. With the poor and mean and lowly lived on earth the Saviour holy, and through all his wondrous childhood he would honor and obey, love and watch the lowly maiden in whose gentle arms he lay. Christian children all must be mild, obedient, good as he, for he is a child